Hello, welcome to the Miguel Sanchez universe, where we help make your ideas reality. I am your host, Miguel Sanchez. Today, I'm going to have another throwback here. I want to put you into a room that I was in. My last episode, I let you listen to a speech I gave at a conference called Collide with Tomorrow in San Diego. And from being a part of the conference, I was able to sit in on a few cool other speakers. So I recorded them, and I'm gonna go over the best ones. So today's I will be introducing you to a session that was called Sell Without Selling, and this session really changed the way I look at business. The guy in there that you'll hear, he brings up a point about how would you run your business different if you knew you could never leave it, like you would work it till you died. How would you change the way you work, period? And how would you change the way you build that business? So that was, a very transformational thought for me. But there's a lot of gems in here. I highly recommend you listen to the whole thing. It was a great talk.
You either see it's not a problem, or you don't believe it can be done. And it is hard to deprogram clients to derail a pitch from a global ad agency account where they're running it through search consultants, etc. It's difficult to do that, but it's not impossible. And we have this hierarchy of, if you can't win without pitching, you try to derail. If you can't derail, you try to gain the inside track. If you can't gain some sort of advantage, then you should walk away. And I've done a little research, and I'll share it with you in this talk, that proves that if you can't get some sort of advantage given to you, if you can't get some concession from the client, you're not going to win. Like statistically, your odds of winning are about 1/2n, with ending the number of firms under consideration. But as soon as you can get a concession granted to you, your odds of winning actually are greater than they are of losing. So our whole approach to how agencies should go about new business is, you don't be the polite, compliant rule follower. You should create obstacles, challenge, push back on a flawed selection process. See if you can't get the rules changed in your favor, even just a little bit. Because if you can get some concessions made to you, granted to you, that's an indication that you're seen as meaningfully different and your likelihood of winning goes up. So that's the approach that we teach fundamentally. But it's funny, creative people, creative businesses, there's certain parts of creative businesses where people just won't think creatively, or it's just harder to think creatively. The buying, where's Neil? Yeah, Neil comes from the agency business and runs an innovation consultancy, is that right?
Culture
consultancy. And we were just commenting on how different it is. The sales process and methods are different. And I said, yeah, it makes you look back on your previous life and wonder, did we really need to do it that way? This idea of this is how it's always been done, and this is what the clients expect. After you see that there are different ways to do this, you wonder, well, did you really need to give all of your thinking away for free? Was it really necessary to do a 100-page pitch deck, stay up till 3 a.m, adding last-minute slides? And again, it's fun early in your career. Okay, what the hell was I talking about? So today, when Ryan asked me if I wanted to come on a talk, and he told me what the audience was, he got a mix of agency folks and client folks, I said, I'd like to do my favorite talk. I've only done it 7 or 8 times over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's meant for agency principals only, and if you're not a principal, you can imagine that you're a principal, because we're going to try on some exercises. The talk is called The 5 Constraints. And here's how it works. This is going to be quite conversational. There's a beautiful world in which all agencies thrive. They don't just survive, they thrive, and all the agencies make tons of money. And that world is called Blairtopia. And the reason all agencies thrive in Blairtopia is my rules are the laws of nature. You have to follow some of my rules. So in this talk, I'm going to give you 5 rules I'm going to give you 5 constraints that I want you to try on. And I'll give you the constraint, and I want you to imagine running your business under this constraint. And your first reaction to each constraint is going to be, that's impossible, I can't do it. And then as you think through it, and I'll give you some time to think through it, and then as we talk through it, I think you'll see that you would be better off if these constraints were imposed on you. Does that make sense? All right, shall we dive in?
Yes.
The first constraint in Blairtopia is called no exit. And the actual constraint is you can never sell your business and you can never retire. Okay, now if you've got a piece of paper or something to type in, I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so, and I want you to write down quickly, make a note of the things that, if you had to live under this constraint, what are the things that you would do in your business differently? What are the things that you would need to start doing now? Still writing, that's impressive. This is a long list. My next question is, what are the changes you would make in your life outside of your business if you had to live under this constraint? All right, let's start with the first one. What did you come up with for changes you would have to make in your business?
So you go. Yeah. Be way more selective about where the clients that I.
Yeah.
Be way more selective about the lines of work. That's a great one. What else? Slow down. Slow down.
Solidify the team is running with us to make sure everybody's on board in the lines of vision.
Yeah, you would be more selective about your team members. You would spend more time on culture.
I would actually say give them a piece of the future, just build it together.
Give them a piece of the future, build it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to stay with you for a long time.
Build a legacy, as and the other part of it was to give them a piece, to feel not only included but encapsulate not just a command team, but looking at the lowest of the team and raising them up, building that legacy, and getting them, having them feel like they're a piece of it a lot more than just it's a job and I'm coming and going.
Yeah. You're committed till the end. You want people around you who are committed. You
There's
want
no retirement
incentives. How many of you would just went "Ugh," at the idea of never retiring and never selling? Some of you maybe own platforms or scalable like product companies, etc., where I would say that wouldn't necessarily apply. But if you're running a fee-for-service, like a customized services business, I really think this is a very meaningful constraint. It still works. The first time I ever heard of Phil Libin, who was the founder of Evernote, he didn't say I'm never retiring. He said I'm never selling my business. He said I'm going to get all of it, and then he was forced out of the business. But he said, I was listening to a podcast, he was being interviewed. He said, I'm committing my professional life to Evernote. Everything that I need to get out of my career, I'm going to get out of this company. And I was struck by my reaction because I'm an Evernote user and fan. And as soon as he said, and we've got like a certain platform of, we use Salesforce, Google, Apple and like one or two other things. As soon as I heard him say that, I went, Evernote's in. Like it's like he's committed, I'm committed as a user, and I was really struck by my immediate reaction. Okay, what else did you come up with?
I think it's interesting because it's like I constantly think about how to make myself irrelevant. So would I stay in that racing people, or where's my relevance in the business?
When there's an implication about your role, how your role needs to change immediately. But as you age, right, you think, okay, if I'm 85, like who wants to take advice from an 85-year-old? And there's a line somewhere, and I don't know where the line is, and it's not just pure chronological age, but there's at some point it's like, okay, you're the, you know, so you're not going to be showing up for client meetings at 85, right? So your role's going to have to change over time. But you're going to want your role to change over time.
Yeah, I was thinking what the gentleman said, they just said succession, like bring up the next leadership team so your role can get narrower and narrower and narrower. By the end, you just need one thing and you're ready for it.
Yeah.
But it's your favorite thing.
Yeah, and we as entrepreneurs, we should all be doing this, right? And there's an exercise, I've been through strategic coaching program for entrepreneurs, and they're very good at this. You take 2 weeks and you write down everything you do for 2 weeks. And then you basically color code the stuff. Here's the stuff in green that I love to do, I'm really good at, and I'm energized by. The stuff in red, I hate, I don't like, I'm not very good at it. It drains me of energy. And then there's the stuff in the middle. And they would have you put it into quadrants, the 2 sections in the middle. But I just do the 3. And the stuff in red, you should just get rid of right away. And as more time goes by, the stuff that's in the middle, the neutral stuff, you should get rid of that. And at some point, you should just be doing the stuff that you're really good at, that you're energized by. And that pool will actually get smaller and smaller over time if you keep living by this model.
Yeah, I call that the rest of that I stopped doing this.
Yeah.
The rest of stuff like that, I stopped doing that. Let other people do. I just focus on the stuff.
Yeah.
That's how you grow.
Yeah. So if you're in this over the long term, the big thing is your role's going to change. We're all too busy, right? We're all doing too much. There's some difficult HR decisions you have to make, not just about keeping good people, but there are people you're keeping around that you probably shouldn't. This became a really powerful idea for me. I heard it from a few different places, but at roughly the same time. But when I heard it for the first time, I realized as a consultant working with agency principals, I realized that when my clients get to a certain age, they quit making the difficult decisions. And it's not a chronological age, it's when they can see the finish line. If they can articulate to me an idea of when they want to retire, it's over. Like, unless a transition, I work with some PR firms that tend to be better at transitions, so that there are a lot of older people running PR firms, and they seem to be pretty good at bringing along the next level of leadership. But that's not usually the case. Usually it's got some principal who's communicating that I'm going to, 5 years I'm retiring or selling or whatever. As soon as that's being articulated to him or herself, to the team, to outsiders like me, it's over. So they quit making difficult decisions. And the way confirmation bias works is people quit bringing them difficult decisions to make. They don't even see the difficult decisions that need to be made because they're not being presented to them. Because people around them know you're not going to make a difficult decision. So as soon as you say retiring in 5 years, it's over. They say you quit growing. Another reason I think we don't need to sell and don't need to retire, I'm convinced that retirement is just an outdated notion. I'm 52, half of my friends are turning 70 this year. I live in a remote mountain village of hippies in British Columbia, a 10-hour drive from Vancouver. And half of my friends are expat Americans who left the US because they were evading the Vietnam War in the early 70s. So they're all of the same age. It's really interesting. And I can see some of them have retired, and the pattern that I see is you've got this idea of what you're going to do after retirement, you do it all in 2 years, and then you have a sense of like purposelessness. Like there's no mission. We're not coal miners, right? We work with our brains, and as you age, you want to stay mentally sharp. We don't have to preserve our bodies by letting go of the work that we do. Also, as entrepreneurs, we have the ability to shape our reality, unlike almost anybody else. And if our reality sucks, it's nobody's fault but ours. And you know, some people aren't cut out for it, and they really should sell, shut down, retire, go do something else, go get a job. And then I think if you have a job, yeah, I think retirement maybe makes sense. What are the things you identified about changes you would make in your life?
They were all health related.
Yeah, aren't they? Like the first one is like, I would start working out. And I get it, but I'm not entirely sure of the connection. But it's like, I'm doing this forever. I might as well stay in shape.
I look at it more as like your entire company now is based off of you, so everyone depends on you. Now your health is now, you know, like people's livelihood, their kids, everyone's kind of depending on you. So that's where it comes from. It's an investment.
Yeah.
Set the example for
I,
them.
I thought about setting a serious hour constraint, like a very low hour constraint.
Yeah.
I put that out Not for me.
What is that, 12 hours? Or is that 18?
Shorten your commute.
I like that one.
Yeah. Anybody put anything down about vacations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to find that balance, and good luck with anybody probably in this room telling one person that has balance.
I think I had that in the first part.
You know,
Yeah.
balance is
Was
difficult.
Just from a culture standpoint, just the more focus on vacation, time off, to help ease.
Because I'm taking away from you this ridiculous notion that you're going to delay gratification. Right? That you're going to work yourself really, really hard right now, and then there's a payoff in the end. So
Appreciate
you can't. You need gratification now. You need balance now.
I've never bought into that, like waiting until I'm 60 to have fun.
No, no,
Yeah, screw that.
do it
you know?
today.
I want to party now, work now. Like, what if I walk out the door and get my bus tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You had fun before.
Yeah.
Take those expensive
I've
vacations
always done that.
And the key to the learning to do this is you book and pay for your vacations 1 year in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it.
It forces you to do that.
I put one down, I opened an office in Costa Rica. We never open the offices where we want to be, we open them where the work is. I would open it where I want to be.
My second last vacation was in Costa Rica.
That's about last week.
I have driving more meaning into the work. If you're going to be
Yeah.
working forever, now all of a sudden that has to take on a different role.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? Like all of a sudden you try and constrain. So one of the first times I did this exercise was in a 2-day seminar. I was workshopping with a colleague. And I had everybody, we had a lot of time to do this exercise, and I had everybody write down. And there's a guy who was sitting right in front of me, and he was staring at me, kind of red-faced. Everybody else is writing. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, I can't, and he was one of 3 partners in the firm. He said, I can't. I said to him, I won't name his name, but I said to him, what percentage of your time, of your day, do you spend doing things that you don't like, that you're not good at, that drains energy from you? And he looked at me and said, 100%. So here's the sad part of the story. This was about 5 years ago, and my colleague and friend that I was doing the event with, he texted me about 5 months ago, and he said, "Do you know so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Stage 4 terminal cancer." And that was so-and-so. Here's a guy who spent his entire career, he was one of 3 partners, and he took on all the shitty work that he didn't like to do, but he did it for the team. And the idea was, no, I am killing myself now so that I can enjoy retirement. And he's not, he's younger than me, I think. So, die with your boots on. And I think my own personal philosophy is I'm completely committed to my business. I'm never going to sell, I'm never going to retire. But something might change one day, and I reserve the right to change my mind. But if I change my mind, I'm going to do it right then. If I change my mind, I'm going to say, put the business up for sale, or I'm retiring, or whatever. I'm not kind of easing into it, because as soon as I do that, then everything will change. Okay, so that's constraint number 1. No exit. You can never sell, you can never retire. Constraint number 2 is sorry. It's not constraint number 2, that's constraint number 3. Constraint number 2 is you can never have more than 10 clients at any one time. Now there are exceptions, so when they're pitching, I used to be a consultant, and I would never have more than 10 clients at one time as a solo consultant. The most I would have would be 4 or 5. But as a product, we're a training company, so we're a productized services company. We have about 100 clients. If you are a product company or a productized services company, this doesn't apply to you. But if you are a customized services firm, like most marketing agencies, then this would apply to you. And how many of you have more? How many of you who are in the customized services business and have more than 10 clients? Any of you have more than 30? Yeah, so generally speaking, every agency can fire the bottom third of their client list. They will be more profitable and you will live longer. And I could have you do an exercise where you rank your clients by profit, roughly profitability, and without having to measure quantitatively, you know, and you start at the top and you work your way down, and for most of you, somewhere between 6 and 8, there's this level. There's like 2, 3, or 4 at the top, and then there's this other big stretch. And for some of you, it's 1 at the top, and you're very vulnerable because of that. Then there's a lump of somewhere between 6 and 8. And then after that, there's kind of a line, and somewhere around 10. It might be somewhere around 12. It might be somewhere around 6 for you, where you just draw the line. And if I had you draw the line, you would all start to smile. Like, you tell me where the line is, and you draw the line, and you're trying on getting rid of these clients. And you imagine, the reason you don't do this right now is, as a creative person, excuse me, you're excited about what could be the next project that you've never done before. So you make sure your capacity always exceeds your opportunity. And you never want to be in a position where you have to say no to anything. But if you were in a position where you had to say no, like the first thing that came up about the previous exercises, I would be more discerning about clients. This would force you to be more discerning about your client base. It doesn't matter what size your agency is, you should have between 8 and 15, 12, 15, 15 is pretty high, 8 and 12 ongoing clients at any one time. Now, if you're more project-based, and increasingly agencies are more project-based, it might make sense to be closer to 15. The last time I did this talk, before I went up on stage, I was sitting at a table with a guy who had started a PR firm. He was on the client side. He had started his PR firm a few years ago. And he, I said, how many clients do you have? He said, 8. And I said, how many clients are you trying to grow to? He said, 8. He said, they're all global technology companies. I just want to go deeper into those companies. And that's exactly how you should be thinking about this. So 10 clients. Warren Buffett says, if I could give you a punch card, that's how old Warren Buffett is, a punch card with 20 punches in it, and each punch represents an investment that you can make in your life. If you could only make 20 investments in your life, you would become a far better investor. If you could only take on 10 clients, if you had to let a client go before you brought one on, you would force yourself to have more direct, meaningful conversations with that prospective client. You would say, hey, before we get too far, you should know we need our clients to spend this much money with us in fees over the course of a year. You would be discerning about the good fit. You would know who's going next, who you're going to replace. Okay, I'm going to move quickly. I'm a little bit behind here. The next constraint is your proposals are limited to 1 page. Anybody doing 1-page proposals now?
Only 1 page.
Only 1 page ever?
If you need more than that on a resume, or it's too much.
Yeah, so what goes on the 1 page? How many, some of you are still doing 100, 150 to 150 page decks where we conflate the proposal, the contract, and let's like pitch, convince documents.
Capability study.
Yeah, right? And I spent the first 10 years of my career making those things. I remember my boss coming along saying, how's the deck coming? And I went, here's the latest version on my desk. And he picked it up, didn't even crack the cover, and he went, fatten it up. And walked away. Smart. Okay, so I spent years saying the proposal, the document is the contract. The proposal is the words that come out of your mouth. here's what we would do for you, here's how long it would take, here's how much it would cost. If you're in agreement in principle, then we'll start writing up the details in a contract. So you get the agreement in principle, you deliver the oral proposal, you get the agreement in principle, and then you start writing. That's the way it should work. And then at some point, I changed my point of view on pricing. And I realized you have to put forward options to your client. You should be putting forward 3 or 4 options. And that's when I realized, well, your proposal, if you're going to deliver options to your client, then you need to summarize those options. And you should summarize it on a piece of paper, and you can do it in one piece of paper. And the beauty of putting your proposal on one page, if you have 3 or 4 options on one page, you can't possibly include everything. Therefore, the proposal still is the words that come out of your mouth. And this is just a summary. And it forces you to not go into presentation mode. Because I like to say you can present to people or you can be present to them. You can't do both. You have to choose. And one of the big problems we have in the creative profession, I talked about this in my first book, is we go into presentation mode. So one-page proposal, what should be on that one-page proposal? 3 options or 4 options. In my book, Pricing Creativity, there's this image. I first saw it in a book called Priceless by William Poundstone. The image is from MIT cognitive scientist Edward Adelson. On this checkerboard, it's a little hard to see, but there's 2 squares, letter A and B. I'm reading Poundstone's book, and he shows me this image, and he says, those 2 squares, A and B, are the same color. But your brain doesn't see them that way. I'm thinking exactly what you're thinking right now. No, they're not the same color. Yeah, they're the same color. What Poundstone says in his book is get some pieces of paper, cover up all of the other squares, and when you cover up the last one, you'll hear a click in your brain and you'll see that these 2 are indeed the same color. But by showing you these 2 bars, I get you to show you that they are indeed the same color. And when I saw that image, that's when I knew that you had to deliver options in your proposal. Because the lesson here, what's the connection? The lesson is human beings cannot subjectively perceive absolute values. You give your client a proposal with 1 option, 1 price on it, you're asking them to make the decision, is this proposal, is what you're proposing to do worth this price? And their brain is not wired to answer that question. They need context. The question their brain is wired to answer is which of these is the best option. So if you don't give them comparisons in the way of options, they will go and get them. They'll go get bids from other agencies, they'll go back in time, what have they paid you previously, etc. They are going to make comparisons, so your job is to control the comparison. That's why we put forward a 1-page proposal with 3 options. And you can't possibly describe all of the detail of what people get in one option and what they give up in the other option. You can only summarize it. It forces you to go into conversation mode rather than presentation mode. When you go into conversation mode, you increase the likelihood that you will get honest feedback back. And in the agency world, we're shitty conversationalists. And you just think about it. Think about the way the agency relationship begins with their clients. Clients on their own, separate from you, decide they need to fire their no-good current agency and hire a new one. So they decide, okay, let's send an RFP out to these 12. They lob out the RFP. Now, you're not really allowed to talk to the client, right? So you give them some information, you make a whole bunch of assessments, you come up with your response, you lob it back. They look at all 12 and they go, well, these 4 are pretty good. Let's invite them in for a presentation. They lob over to you the brief. You're still not really allowed to talk to them. So you've got to make all of these guesses. So you do all of this work. You walk into the room to do your presentation. The client's sitting there with the arms crossed. They're not saying much. You go into presentation mode. They nod and they go, very good, thank you, we'll get back to you. You leave and you say, that was great, we killed it, didn't we? Yeah, high five. And then somebody says, well, that one person didn't really say anything. I don't know that we really killed it. You don't really know. Because the client isn't really forthcoming. And then on their own, the client says, well, they were pretty good, let's hire them. And then they lob over to you the real brief, and now they start to work with you. But right from the very beginning of our relationship with our clients, we're not talking to each other. We're not actually working with each other. We talk a good game about transparency and collaboration, and so do clients, but it's all bullshit. It's brief and present. Brief and present. And we created this problem because tied to what it means to be creative is the ability to see. Tied to that is the ability to think on your feet. So I've got an objective assessment test, and I've tested thousands of people on this, but you're high in autonomy, meaning you're not very systematic in process oriented. You can that allows you to see around corners. And for reasons I don't understand, if I put you in front of a room presenting to a client, when you're in this situation, you do the client, I'll be you. Ladies and gentlemen, so glad you could join me today. I'm going to show you the work. My team's been working on this I've just been going all night. I just can't wait to show you what we've got. So in a minute, I'm going to turn this around, or I'm going to advance to the next slide. And this moment right now, before I show the work, and I'm drawing it out, and I'm building it up, and I'm building it up, some of you are smiling because this is the happiest you ever are. This is what Mahai Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the term flow state. You are in a state of flow. You're pushed out towards the edge of your abilities, but not beyond. You still have a sense of mastery, but you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. And when you turn the work around, you're going to hear, oh my God, I love it, you're brilliant, serotonin release, you feel fantastic. Or you're going to hear the uncomfortable silence of failure. Right? And it's that not knowing, because your ability to deal with the objections or the not knowing in that moment, it's like you're standing at the precipice. That is a superpower. We love presenting so much that we're willing to do it for free in a pitch, and we've baked it into the entire sales cycle, the entire relationship with the client. We don't actually need these big reveals. The relationship doesn't need them. We need them personally, and then we rationalize why they're there. And we've conditioned the client to expect it. So now it's brief and present, brief and present, brief and present. So what I would have you do is just break down those barriers. So your 3-page proposal looks like this. And I've written an entire book on this. It's called Pricing Creativity, A Guide to Profit Beyond the Billable Hour. There are 6 rules in that book, 6 rules of pricing creativity. Rule number 2 is always offer options. And rule number 3 is anchor high. So what that means is when you're presenting your proposal, you start with the highest price, because the job of the anchor price is not to sell the anchor option. The job of the anchor price is to make this option look more affordable. And I'm very low on time here, but I have a client, I have a friend who's a solo consultant. And he had a client with a $30,000 budget, and he closed them on a $300,000 engagement. So 10 times the client's budget. That was the middle option. What do you suppose the price of the anchor option was that he started with to make $300,000 low and affordable?
Million.
1 million, higher. 3 million, higher. 10 million, higher. 15 million, higher. 20 million, higher. 25, higher.
Jets.
$30 million. Try this on. Your client says, I have a budget of X. I have a budget of X, and you say, okay, I'm going to go away and think about the ways that we can help you, and I'll come back with a proposal of how we can work together, and I'll have 3 different options. And then you come back and you say, okay, we've got 3 different ways we can work together, and you ignore his budget for the moment. And you say, we first asked ourselves, what's the most value we could create for you? What's the highest level of certainty we could bring to the engagement where we would help you capture the value that we talked about earlier? So this means he had a value conversation, which is a very important step. And he uncovered, I don't know the details, but he probably uncovered that if everything went well, he could help create $100 million in value. So, and I come up with a really elaborate solution, and hold on to your hats because the price is $30 million. And the client can't hear what you say next because all they hear is boom, 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 and it doesn't matter because the job of that price is not to sell that solution, although clients will buy it from time to time. So and I don't know the details of it, but he's written an article about it. I haven't read it yet, but I don't know the details. But I know this guy. I know 2 things. Number 1, there was probably $100 million in value creation on the table. And number 2, he probably put a large percentage, if not all, of that compensation at risk. He tied it to performance in some way, and there's an infinite number of ways to do that. So anchor high. Anchoring is there's all kinds of science behind it. If you read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, he and his research partner, Amos Tversky, coined this. It's a powerful effect. You can't even undo it if you know it's being done to you. Anchoring is the idea that the first piece of information on a subject will skew your final decision. And if we had more time, I could get into the science of how it works and how there's no boomerang effect. There's no price that's too high that will cause a backlash of what the client ends up paying you. Now, they test that through mock juries and the awards that mock juries will give based on how much is asked. I think there's a backlash in your world, and the backlash is if you price is higher than the value you propose to create, or an unfair percentage of the value you propose to create. So if my friend Cal delivered a $30 million solution and he proposed to only create $30 million in value, that would probably have a backlash effect.
Do you start with the anchor?
Always. Creative firms, you anchor intuitively. When you go in and present creative solutions and you're worried the client's going to buy the safest one, you go in and present a really, really risky one, and then you present one that's not so risky. I used to do that all the time. My mistake is I would do the risky one last. You always, when it comes to numbers, when it comes to risky, when it comes to pushing the client, it's the first piece of information. You always start with the high one, and don't worry about the reaction. They'll get over it. I have to finish in 1 minute. Constraint number 4 is at every point in your relationships with your clients and your prospects, you have to say what you're thinking. You have a few seconds to collect your thoughts and communicate and figure out how you're going to communicate what you're thinking. But I want to ask the question, when's the last time you were in a meeting with a client or a prospective client in the sale and you found yourself nodding yes, thinking this is the stupidest thing I ever heard?
That's true.
Thinking, oh, yeah, we'll respond to this RFP, but I fucking hate RFPs. If you hate RFPs, you should communicate that to the client. And choose your language carefully, right? So think back to the most recent exchange you had with a client or a prospective client where you didn't say what you're thinking. What would you have said? What's the situation? Let's hear some.
I had one. I was dealing with a startup, and it was kind of fishy whether they had the money already, right? And I thought it based on the conversation, and I didn't say it. And I wasted a lot of time, basically.
Yeah, hey, before we go too far, you mentioned a budget, but allow me to ask, do you have that money now? Have you raised the funds now? I had a client of mine, agency principal years ago, dealing with startups. Somebody said, we've got $3 million in the marketing budget for next year. And his response, what do you have in the bank for marketing right now? Right, these direct conversations. So you don't get all the way down the road where you're over invested in the sale and loss aversion bias and some cost bias kick in, and you can't extricate yourself because you're over invested. So if there's bad news, you want to hear it early. If you have a problem with the selection process, tell the client you have a problem with the selection process. I have my clients say this line, we don't typically respond to RFPs, and then you just stop, pause, and say nothing. Now, if you don't like responding to RFPs the way I don't like responding to RFPs, I'm going to Perth, Australia in a few days to do some training for an Australian company. And a couple of weeks ago when we were sealing the deal, I was on the phone with the managing partner, and she said, okay, can you, we agreed what I would do, what the training engagement would look like, and she said, can you send me a proposal? And I gave her one of my favorite sentences, which is, I'm not really in the proposal writing business. Pause. And then she went, okay, well, how do I communicate this to my partner? And I said, I'll write you an email and summarize what we talked about in the email. So sent her the email, we got on the phone a couple of days later, she said, okay, we're gonna do this. And she said, she apologized. I'm so sorry I made you write it out in an email. That's the way it should be, right? So yeah. I don't like writing proposals. I'm not really in the proposal writing business. I don't like responding to RFPs, et cetera, et cetera. Say what you think. You will be better off for it. So you do it early so there's no emotional buildup.
Yeah.
If you've ever blown up at somebody, it's because you didn't say what you were thinking a long time ago, and it built up, and you couldn't hold it anymore, so you just blurted something really unkind. We have a principle at Win Without Pitching, kind ruthlessness. We're ruthless in our standards and our behavior, and we're kind in our language, and if you want to be kind in your language, you have to say what you're thinking early. I told you, I'll just share this. I participate, will be done in 2 minutes. I participated in an omnibus study on agency new business development a few years ago. I submitted 2 questions. First question is, thinking of the most recent piece of new business that you lost, to what extent did you affect the buying process? And the next question was, thinking of the most recent piece of new business that you won, to what extent did you affect the buying process? So if you don't affect the buying process, you're far more likely to lose than you are to win. And I said earlier, I think anecdotally the number is about 1/2n. If there's 4 firms under consideration and you can't get a concession granted to you, you can't get the rules changed in your behavior, even just in your favor, even just a little bit, 1 in 4 firms under consideration, your odds of winning are about 1 in 8, because your assumption should be that somebody has the inside track, somebody has the advantage. As soon as you can moderately affect the buying process, and I didn't tell the audience, here's what I see as moderately, here's what I see as significantly affecting the buying process, but I've had conversations with thousands of people like you over when I've had more time over what does it mean to you to moderately affect the buying process? Get the dates changed, get access to information that they're not sharing with others. If you significantly affect the buying process, you're going to win. This isn't, it's just showing correlation. I think there's some causation there, but the correlation is you ask for a concession, it's granted to you because they see you as meaningfully different. You have power in the buy-sell relationship. Your desire, the client's desire for you is high. They see you as different, they want to work with you, they grant you the concession. So you ask for a concession of some kind to get the behavioral proof that they see you as meaningfully different. It's not enough for them to say, no, we really want to work with you, you have to play ball with us. You would say, okay, we'll submit this, but you have to do something for us. Okay, we'll do this for you. You get the behavioral concession, that's proof that they see you as meaningfully different. It's proof that you're more likely to win than you are to lose. If you can't get a behavioral concession, the odds are long. A significant concession would be get the client to think about their challenge differently. Your competitors are pitching to the brief and you've got the client realizing the brief is all wrong. There's a whole book called The Challenger's Sale written about it. Last point is, I'm not going to spend any time on this because time isn't real. It's a human construct that allows us to measure change effectively. Until there's from time. Imagine that you had to run your firm and you could not track or sell time. And I'll just share with you this principle, that I named a couple of weeks ago, the inefficiency principle. The idea that efficiency and innovation are mutually or opposable objectives. You can't increase one without decreasing the other. So an efficient firm is pursuing a threshold of utilization, right? A certain utilization rate. The threshold of respectability is about 60% utilization across the firm. 60% of all of the time available from all of the people in the firm, even the non-billable people, 60% of the total time gets billed. You cross that threshold, and that's in our business, that's kind of efficient. If you're selling sprints, that wouldn't be efficient. If your threshold would be higher. You're probably closer to 80%. But you have to understand that as you try to increase efficiency, you give up innovation. And the corollary is you give up the ability to command extraordinary profits. Why you give up, the reason innovation is the opposite of efficiency is the elimination of waste. And innovation is inherently wasteful and messy. Innovative firms have the freedom to fail. They have the freedom to iterate. I'm having a dinner next week with a woman who's done a research MBA on the subject of why established companies find it so hard to innovate, and I listened to her talk, and it's basically this in different language. She said that the answer is slack. Slack is in the form of time, freedom to fail. And established companies are driven by efficiencies, and they get rid of all of the slack. And she said one form of slack is hiring people who are overqualified for the job. I'd never thought of that before. Giving people more time, allowing a culture where it's okay to fail, time to iterate, etc. When you give your people that type of time, they'll come up with really novel solutions. And if you know just a little bit about value-based pricing, you'll be able to do what my friend Cal did. When your client says, my budget is X, you can say, here's a proposal to do something at 1,000X. And in the end, have them buy at 10X. The 5 constraints are no exit. You can never sell. You can never retire. You can no more than 10 clients at any one time. Limit your proposals to 1 page. Always say what you're thinking and untethered from time. Welcome to Libertoria.
Thanks for listening to the Miguel Sanchez Universe. Hopefully that was helpful. And please share and subscribe to the podcast. And hope to see you back next time. Thank you.